Since he teamed up with Ozzy Osbourne. The editors of Guitar Player magazine have just presented the hard-driving guitarist with the Best New Talent Award for 1981.
The story between Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads is one of those rock and roll rivalries that still gets people talking today. Both of them were absolute guitar legends, true innovators who changed the way rock guitar was played forever. Randy Rhoads became a huge influence on many heavy metal guitar players from the 80s, including names like John Sykes, Michelangelo Batio, who I even jammed with, and Zakk Wylde, just to name a few. And Eddie Van Halen, his influence was basically everywhere.
I'd like to present you with the 1981 Best New Talent Award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Guitar players across the world were chasing his tone, his technique, and his style. Everyone wanted the same guitars, the same amps, and the same wild sound Eddie had, including me. So what actually happened between Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen? Why didn't these two legendary guitar players get along very well? And why, after Randy tragically died in that airplane crash, did Eddie say that everything Randy did, he learned from him, and that he didn't really think he did anything I haven't done? That comment shocked a lot of people because it sounded pretty out there. But according to many stories from people close to them, the tension may have started earlier than most fans realize. Randy himself reportedly made some sharp comments about Eddie's playing at times. The whole situation goes all the way back to around 1976 or 1977, when Randy first saw Van Halen perform live, and the experience hit him hard. According to Randy's former girlfriend, Jan, the very first time Randy Rhoads saw Van Halen play, he took her with him to the show. Later, Jan said that Randy came away from that night completely devastated. At that point, Randy was basically the king of Burbank. People were always telling him how incredible he was on guitar. But seeing Eddie Van Halen perform was a serious wake-up call. Still, it didn't just discourage him, it pushed him even harder. Randy thought Van Halen was amazing, and he suddenly wanted to reach that same level himself. Randy's friend, Kelly Garney, shared another interesting piece of the story. He said, "We first heard about Van Halen when they were still known as Mammoth. They were playing parties down in Pasadena. We'd hear rumors about this loud, incredible band playing down there. Eventually, Randy convinced his girlfriend to drive him down to one of those wild party gigs just to hear them play. When he came back, Kelly asked him what he thought of the band, but Randy didn't say much. All he said was that they were pretty good, which was surprising. Not long after that, the bands actually crossed paths. Randy's group Quiet Riot and Van Halen ended up playing the same show at Glendale College in April 1977. Quiet Riot opened the show, and Van Halen was the headliner that night. At one point, Randy walked up to Eddie and asked him a very specific question about guitar setup. He wanted to know how Eddie managed to keep his guitar in tune without using a locking nut on his tremolo system. But Eddie refused to explain it. He told Randy it was his own secret. For Randy, that moment apparently stung. He was known for being generous with other musicians and loved sharing knowledge. If someone wanted to learn something, Randy would gladly show them. So when Eddie shut him down like that, it reportedly felt like a serious snub, almost like a verbal slap in the face. Then, in 1982, during a guitar clinic, Randy was asked directly about the comparisons to Eddie Van Halen. The question was simple. Were critics right when they said he copied Eddie? Randy answered carefully but honestly. He said, "Well, we're both from the same town, and we were both in local bands. It seemed like everybody in LA was a lead guitar player, and we all played very similarly. Everybody used to say we all sounded very much the same." Still, Randy hinted that something about that idea didn't quite add up. A whole group of guitar players suddenly playing the same style at the same time, that seemed a little suspicious. Someone had to start that wave, and many people believed that person was Eddie Van Halen. Back in 1977, three major local bands were dominating the Hollywood club scene: Van Halen, Quiet Riot, and The Boys. Night after night, they were rocking famous spots like the Starwood and the Whiskey in Los Angeles, battling for attention and building their reputations in one of the most competitive music scenes in the country. And right in the middle of it all, the quiet rivalry between Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads was already starting to grow. George Lynch was playing in a band called The Boys back in the late 70s, tearing up the Sunset Strip clubs in Hollywood. At the time, that whole scene was exploding with talent. Bands like Van Halen, Quiet Riot, and The Boys were all grinding it out in the same clubs, trying to stand out in one of the most competitive music scenes anywhere. Around that time, Randy Rhoads made a comment about Eddie Van Halen's playing that raised some eyebrows. Randy reportedly said Eddie's playing was mostly smoke and mirrors. Then he added something even more surprising. He said if people really wanted to see someone who could truly play guitar, they should watch George Lynch because he's an amazing player. That comment spread quickly through the local guitar scene. Now here's where the story gets even crazier. George Lynch's band, The Boys, had a big opportunity lined up one night. They were scheduled to showcase for Gene Simmons from Kiss, who was starting his own label and looking for new talent. The Boys thought this could be their big break, but Van Halen was opening the show, and that's when everything changed. When Van Halen hit the stage, the energy in the room exploded. Eddie's playing shocked everyone in the crowd, and the band absolutely tore the place apart. By the time they finished their set, the buzz in the room had completely shifted. According to the story that's been told around Hollywood for years, Gene Simmons decided he didn't even need to stay and watch the Boys perform after seeing Van Halen. George Lynch later admitted that moment shook him badly. After seeing Eddie play, he said he walked away thinking he had two choices: either quit playing guitar altogether or start taking lessons from this guy. That night reportedly set George back a few years mentally because Eddie had just raised the bar to a whole different level. Lynch would eventually go on to play with Dokken and become one of the most respected guitarists of the 80s.
When they told me, I thought they were joking, because Sharon always jokes with me anyway.
But before that happened, he had a few close calls with another huge opportunity. George actually auditioned for Ozzy Osbourne's lead guitarist spot twice. The first time was in 1979 when Ozzy was forming his new band, and that gig went to Randy Rhoads. The second time happened in 1982 when Ozzy needed a replacement for Brad Gillis. Lynch said he was hired for 3 days before Ozzy changed his mind and went with Jake E. Lee instead. And speaking from personal experience, trying to land that Ozzy guitar spot wasn't easy. I even tried to audition myself when Zakk Wylde ended up getting the gig. I sent my photo and demo tape to Ozzy, but I never got a call back. George Lynch didn't become widely known until later in the 80s. By that time, Van Halen's first album had already been out for several years, and Eddie had completely reshaped the guitar world. Lynch was part of that second wave of shredders that followed after Eddie kicked the doors open for everyone. So when Randy Rhoads dismissed Eddie's playing as smoke and mirrors and suggested George Lynch was the better player, it stirred up a lot of talk. But years later, George Lynch himself told a very different version of the story. In 2009, Lynch openly admitted that many guitar players in the late 70s were actually jealous of Eddie Van Halen. George said, "We were jealous and we were all trying to play catch-up. We thought, oh boy, we'd better get on board. This guy's going to change the world." Lynch also described the first time he heard about Eddie. He kept hearing rumors about a guitarist with a strange European name who had wild stage effects and a crazy sound. According to George, people were saying, "Oh, he's got a torpedo on stage. The bass player wears clogs. They've got bombs going off, and the guitar player is unbelievable." When George finally saw Van Halen live, it blew his mind. At the time, the band was still playing covers of groups like Rainbow and Montrose, along with their own original songs. But what shocked him was that their original music was just as strong or even stronger than the covers. After the show ended, George said he went straight back to the band room and played guitar until the sun came up. One thought kept running through his mind the entire night. How can I get that tone? By 2022, Lynch openly said Eddie Van Halen was a massive influence on him. Randy Rhoads wasn't really an influence on George, but Eddie definitely influenced Randy too. Eddie had done what only a few players in history ever managed to do. Much like Jimi Hendrix before him, he changed how everyone thought about playing guitar. Eddie himself even joked about the whole smoke and mirrors comment during an interview in the 80s. When someone asked him how he learned to play so fast, Eddie answered sarcastically. He said, "I don't play very fast, actually. It's all mirrors, you know." Then he joked that the secret was just locking yourself in a room and practicing. But in 1981, Randy Rhoads gave a surprisingly honest interview with journalist John Styx. When asked if he ever went through an imitation stage like most musicians do, Randy admitted something interesting. He said that while playing live on Suicide Solution, he sometimes used tricks that Eddie Van Halen used, and it actually bothered him. Randy explained, "I do a lot of things that Eddie Van Halen does, and it kills me that I do that. It's just flash, and it impresses the kids, and I'm trying to make a name as fast as I can." Calling Eddie Van Halen's playing just flash definitely sounded a little disrespectful to some fans. Randy Rhoads used his guitar spotlight during Suicide Solution to blow the audience away, but he clearly didn't want people labeling him as an Eddie Van Halen clone. Randy wanted his own identity, his own sound, and his own lane in the guitar world. There's also a strange story that appears in Randy Rhoads' biography by Andrew Klein that makes the whole situation even more interesting. According to the book, one day when Randy was home during a break from Ozzy Osbourne's tour, he decided to stop by his local record store to buy some classical music albums. But when he walked into the store, guess who was standing in line at the register? Eddie Van Halen. The story claims Eddie was buying Ozzy Osbourne's Diary of a Madman album, the record featuring Randy's guitar work. Now think about that for a second. In 1982, Eddie Van Halen was already one of the biggest rock stars on the planet. So the idea that he just happened to walk into the exact same record store at the exact same moment as Randy to buy that album sounds a little too perfect, doesn't it? Some people have questioned whether that story was exaggerated or maybe even invented later on. After all, Eddie could have easily had someone pick up the record for him if he really wanted to hear it. The whole scene almost sounds like something designed to poke fun at Eddie or stir up the rivalry even more. But one thing is clear. Eddie was definitely aware of Randy by the early 80s. Back in 1977, they were all just playing clubs, fighting for attention in the same crowded scene. Then Van Halen exploded with massive success almost overnight. A few years later, Ozzy Osbourne's band took off as well, and suddenly people everywhere were talking about Randy Rhoads and his incredible guitar style. Eddie later said he had read interviews with Randy, which means he was paying attention to what Randy was saying and doing. And people close to Randy said that Eddie Van Halen was actually one of Randy's favorite guitar players, the kind of player who pushed him to get better. Producer Max Norman, who worked on Blizzard of Oz in 1980, remembered Randy talking about Eddie quite a bit. Norman said Van Halen was one of the few guitarists Randy would openly praise. Max once asked him directly, "What guitar players do you like, Randy?" And Randy answered, "I like Eddie Van Halen." At that point, Max Norman had never even seen Eddie play before. So when Randy started doing two-hand tapping in the studio, it was completely new to him. But Norman made it clear that Randy wasn't copying Eddie's licks note for note. Instead, he picked up some ideas and methods from Eddie and turned them into his own style. And honestly, that's completely normal in music. Every guitarist learns something from the players who came before them. Randy's friend, Rudy Sarzo, later confirmed that Eddie Van Halen and Gary Moore were probably Randy's two biggest guitar inspirations. Those were the players he admired the most. Randy himself even spoke respectfully about Eddie in interviews. At one point he said, "Eddie is great. I don't want to get near competing with people like that." In another interview, he simply said, "I mean, Eddie Van Halen is fantastic." Then there's a famous moment from February 2nd, 1982 in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, during a Randy Rhoads guitar clinic. A fan in the crowd asked him a direct question. The fan said, "I've heard a lot of rumors that you're like just copying off Eddie Van Halen. Was you influenced by him, his technique and playing?" The crowd started reacting and making noise, but Randy answered honestly. He said, "Yeah, I was actually." So Randy never denied that Eddie had some influence on him. In fact, Randy would sometimes pick up Van Halen records and use them when teaching guitar students, but he didn't copy Eddie's solos note for note, and he didn't fill his solos with Eddie's exact licks. Like Max Norman said, Randy just absorbed certain ideas and techniques and then created his own sound. Then in March 1982, Randy Rhoads tragically died in that terrible airplane crash while touring with Ozzy Osbourne. After Randy's death, Eddie Van Halen was asked about him in an interview, and the conversation became pretty controversial. The interviewer asked Eddie what he thought of Randy Rhoads. Eddie responded, "Well, he was one guitarist who was honest anyway, because I read some interviews that he did. He said that everything he did, he learned from me, you know, and he was good." The interviewer then said Randy was the first big guitarist to appear after Eddie and inspire that kind of worship from guitar fans. Eddie replied, "Oh, sure, but I don't really think he did anything that I haven't done." The interviewer pushed back and said, "He's a little different, but I hear a lot of you in him. The first time I heard him, I thought it was a copy of you." Eddie answered, "Yeah, that's what I mean. Anyone who does the things that I do is obviously going to sound a little different, but I can tell when someone's copying my technique. But there's nothing wrong with that. I learned from other people, too." The interviewer agreed and said that's just how music works. People hear something they like and want to learn it. Eddie finished by saying, "Sure, there's nothing wrong with it, man. I've copied other people, too." Now, when people hear Eddie say that everything he did, he learned from me, it can sound pretty arrogant. Randy definitely had his own style and brought something unique to the guitar world. At the same time, Eddie did acknowledge that Randy was a good player. The two were never close friends, but there was clearly a professional rivalry between them. You could almost compare it to the old rivalry between Jimmy Page and Ritchie Blackmore, two legendary guitarists, both pushing the limits of rock guitar in different ways. So when you really look at the whole story, the rivalry between Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads wasn't exactly a bitter feud. It was more like two incredible guitar players rising at the same time, pushing each other from a distance in one of the most competitive music scenes ever. Both of them came out of the same Southern California club circuit where bands had to fight for attention every single night. Places like the Whiskey, the Starwood, and the Sunset Strip clubs were packed with hungry musicians trying to prove they were the best guitarist in the room. And in that environment, comparisons were unavoidable. Eddie Van Halen exploded first in 1978 with the release of Van Halen's debut album, and the impact was immediate. Guitar players everywhere suddenly heard techniques they had never heard before: two-hand tapping, wild dive bombs, insane harmonics, and that massive brown sound tone. It was like someone kicked the door open and showed a completely new way to play rock guitar. A few years later, Randy Rhoads stepped onto the world stage with Ozzy Osbourne, and he brought something totally different. Randy mixed classical music ideas with heavy metal guitar in a way that sounded dramatic, precise, and incredibly musical. Songs like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley instantly showed that Randy wasn't just another flashy player. He had a unique vision for the instrument. So yes, there were comparisons. Yes, there were a few comments back and forth. And sure, sometimes those comments sounded a little sharp. But when you listen carefully to what both players actually said over the years, you can see something else underneath it all: respect. Randy openly admitted that Eddie influenced him. Eddie also acknowledged that Randy was a good guitarist who made a big impact. Neither of them copied the other completely, and neither of them needed to. They were both carving their own paths and building their own legacies. Sadly, Randy Rhoads' story was cut short in 1982 when he died in that tragic airplane accident at only 25 years old. Even with such a short career, his influence on rock and metal guitar became enormous. Generations of guitar players still study his solos, his phrasing, and his songwriting to this day. And Eddie Van Halen continued to change the guitar world for decades after that. His style shaped countless musicians and helped define the sound of rock guitar through the 80s, 90s, and beyond. When you step back and look at the big picture, both Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads stand as two of the most important guitar innovators in rock history. Different styles, different personalities, but both players pushed the instrument forward in a huge way. And honestly, the guitar world is better because both of them existed. Now I want to hear what you think. Do you think Randy Rhoads was heavily influenced by Eddie Van Halen? Or do you think Randy created a completely separate style of his own? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below, because this is one of those rock debates that fans have been arguing about for decades. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more stories about legendary guitar players, rock history, and the wild moments behind the music, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Subscribing really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more guitar stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.